Historians struggle to understand the old kingdom of ancient Egypt. They have even more difficulty understanding pre-dynastic Egypt. It has been said that the rulers of pre-dynastic Egypt were a series of gods and demigods. The order of events in that time period are difficult to establish, and putting dates on these events has been virtually impossible until now. This subject matter is discussed in a book entitled The True Story of Man, the Egyptian Chronicle by Dennis Monroe. We're going to go through this book and bring order to the events in pre-dynastic Egypt, and even put dates on those events. No other book can give this information, so let's dig in and see what we can find. As we get started, let me remind you that there are 2 other YouTube videos based on the book that was mentioned. One video is entitled Origin of the Races. The other video is Egypt, When Did Dynasty 1 Begin? You might want to watch those videos because they provide a foundation for what you will see in this video. To paint a picture of this early period in Egypt, we need to know who the early inhabitants were and when they came on the scene. In the video Origin of the Races, we saw that Geb and Nut were the first man and woman in Egyptian records. They correspond to Adam and Eve, the first man and woman in the biblical record. In the video Egypt, When Did Dynasty 1 Begin? We saw that Adam, or Geb, was put on the earth in 3984 BC. We also saw that Geb and Nut had 3 sons named Osiris, Horus the Elder, and Seth. These correspond to the 3 sons of Adam and Eve, who were Cain, Abel, and Seth. Digging into the book, we find that Horus the Elder called his father, Geb, the ruler of the world. This was a new concept in the minds of these early human beings, and it established Geb as the first world ruler. Exactly when this happened is not known, but it did happen before Seth was born. Since Seth was born when Adam was 130 years old, then Adam, or Geb, was established as world ruler within 130 years after being put on this earth. To be a little more accurate about this, we can assume that Horus the Elder was born when Geb was about 50 years old, and Horus lived 30 years before calling his father ruler of the world. We can say from this that Geb was established as world ruler around 80 years after he was put on the earth. The next event is more important in establishing pre-dynastic time. The event is based on the birth of Enos, so let's briefly look at that. Adam was put on the earth in 0 AM, and AM means age of man. Adam had a son named Seth, who was born when Adam was 130 years old. So he was born in 130 AM. Seth had a son named Enos, who was born when Seth was 105 years old. If you add 130 and 105, you see that Enos was born in 235 AM. We saw earlier that Adam was put on the earth in 3984 BC. Subtract 235 and see that Enos was born in 3749 BC. Genesis 4:26 says something happened when Enos was born. It says that men began to call upon the name of the Lord. But Adam Clarke's commentary says that this verse has been mistranslated. It should read, men began to call themselves by the name of the Lord. Geb, or Adam, was called ruler of the world around 80 years after being put on the earth. But 235 years after being put on the earth, in the year 3749 BC, Geb, or Adam, was elevated to the god status of Ra, the sun god. This is when men began to call themselves gods. When Geb was elevated to God's status, he gave his earthly throne to his firstborn son Osiris. Now we know that Osiris began to rule all Egypt in 3749 BC, and he ruled 28 years until he was killed by his brother Seth. Subtract 28 years and see that Osiris was killed in 3721 BC. With the throne of Egypt being empty, two men are found doing battle to claim that throne. The men were Horus the Younger, son of Isis, and Seth, son of Geb and Nut. Looking at details from the book, we see that Horus the Younger was born out of a relationship between Geb and his own daughter Isis. So Horus the Younger and Seth were half-brothers. Both had the same father but different mothers. These two half-brothers fought for the throne of Egypt, and Geb had to make an early judgment to stop the battle. He gave Upper Egypt to Seth and Lower Egypt to Horus the Younger. They divided Egypt at the city Anu, where the Nile River branched out into the delta. This is how the river became Upper Egypt and the delta became Lower Egypt. This all happened in 3721 BC. The next event occurred in the year 363 of the reign of Ra. If Geb, or Ra, was established as world ruler around 80 AM, then the year 363 of Ra would be around 443 AM. Subtract 443 from 3984 BC, and see that this event occurred around 3541 BC. The year 3541 marks the second battle between Horus the Younger and his half-brother Seth. Horus defeated Seth and reunited Egypt in pre-dynastic times. The next event occurred in the year 400 of the reign of Ra, which would be around 480 AM. In Roman time, this would be around 3504 BC. This date marks the third battle between Horus and Seth. This time, Seth reasserted the independence of Upper Egypt. Battles continued between Upper and Lower Egypt until King Scorpion and King Narmer of Upper Egypt fought a series of battles in Lower Egypt. These battles began a unification process which was completed under King Menes, the first king of Dynasty I. Egypt remained united from this point until the Old Kingdom came to an end with Dynasty VIII as a result of Noah's flood. For further information on this subject, go to DennisMonroe.com and read a portion of this book's creation story. There's also a link to Amazon.com if you are interested in purchasing the book.